Hello, today we're speaking with Martijn Lukaart, founder and CEO of Odd.Bot. Welcome to the podcast, Martijn.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. To start with, could you tell us a little bit about Odd.Bot?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, with Odd.Bot, we have successfully built an autonomous mechanical weeding robot. So this is a robot that can detect and distinguish weeds from crops for the arable outdoor farms. Currently, we have a system that can do weeding in carrot fields, and we focus first on organic farmers to really replace their and help them with the manual weeding. So this is where we are right now. And last season, we've managed to reach the proof of concept phase, and we're now advancing this winter to be ready for next season and come out with our minimal viable product, or do the first paid pilots with this new and improved robot.
Fantastic. And what drove the initial decision to start Odd.Bot?
So I was triggered by a call from Europe, so an open call, which is a request for proposals to tackle the challenge that was given. And that was related to, on one side, the diminishing of the substances that are allowed by farmers to be used on their fields and on the crops. So especially then the herbicides, the chemical herbicides, which are under heavy scrutiny right now. And on the other hand, also the challenge that farmers face to find people to do this manual weeding. The alternative to using the chemicals is the organic farming, where a lot of manual weeding is involved. So that, together with the challenge given that these big machines heavily compress the soil, so you also have the soil compression, therefore it's difficult for crops to regrow and also for the soil to stay healthy. So the challenge was given, and I was already working on a robot in another field, and this really attracted me to write a proposal and come up with a potential solution.
Interesting. And so you mentioned you're working on this robot in another field. Was that part of you had an existing company and you kind of pivoted into this, or
yes.
How did that happen?
Yeah, so it's a long story, and it once started with an app that I created whereby you could you did not have to wait in a physical space or in a line, where you can take your number in the queue remotely with a mobile app. That evolved into a system where you could do remote ordering and prepayments. That evolved into a system for crowdsourced logistics, where I had people that could sign up to do local pickup and delivery tasks. And out of that company called Banran, I was involved with creating an on-demand delivery robot, hence the name Odd.Bot. That is still the name. I was working on that, but that really did not really took off, because we saw that there were quite some challenges around the legislation, and it would take a lot of time before you would see these autonomous driving delivery robots on the sidewalks. Therefore we pivoted into this solution, as we immediately got a lot of traction for the idea, and also we got some help from the Technical University of Delft to develop the first proof of principle. So that really was the start of the Odd.Bot as we know it now, with the mechanical weeding robot.
It's interesting that it was a kind of a regulatory legislation, hurdles that prevented the food delivery robot from taking off, whereas it was this kind of call to action by European regulators that gave the space for Odd.Bot as a farming robot to be developed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. And so you mentioned there was a couple of people involved. What was that early team like, and what does the team look like today?
So the initial team, I started this concept initially at a hackathon. So we started at, it's called the Block Changers Hackathon, which is now called the Odyssey Hackathon, where we created a simulator to train the brains of the robots. And we did so by giving incentives or punishment to these nodes in the system. That's when it started, the idea of the delivery robot. There I met my co-founder, Alex, that we started the company with. But already quite soon we noticed that we did not really align on the strategy. And that was then primarily due to different views about how fast we wanted to go. I wanted to already attract funding, and I saw opportunities to do so, to work toward proof of concept. And he was more into doing it as a side gig besides his regular work. And he wanted to really create something first, make sure that it works before he wanted to attract funding. So that was a break point. So I bought him out, and then managed in May 2019 to attract funding from a proof of concept fund. And with that, if you fast forward to last season, we managed to actually reach proof of concept fund. So that was initially with Alex, and that was my co-founder. And to create this proof of principle, we worked together with the Technical University of Delft. And here we had a team that was quite multidisciplinary from different directions. So we had a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, an aerospace engineer, and mechanical engineers, and an industrial designer working together in this minor robotics. So they were all following this minor for 5 months. So that really helped us to create this first proof of principle. So that was the initial team. From that student team, we have still 2 people on board. And currently we are with 12 people in the team. And we are now in the process of closing our seed funding round to further grow the team in 2021.
Amazing. That's very exciting. And so that seed funding, once that comes in, you plan to kind of expand into 2021. You mentioned earlier that you're focused, or you started with carrots as the primary crop to weed from.
Yeah.
Can the bot potentially be used for multiple crops, or will you need a different type of bot per crop?
No, it can be used for different kind of crops. So we tried to make the robot as versatile as possible. Currently, it's on a width of 1.5 meters wide. So it now drives over 2 ridges of carrots. So here in the province of Flevoland, which is in the heart of the Netherlands, a lot of these organic carrots are being grown on these ridges. But we also already look at training the detection algorithm to distinguish weeds from onions, the sowing onions. And those are grown full field, so flat on the surface. And also we look at the chicory, which is also again grown on the ridges. So currently the robot is bound to this 1.50 meter width. But in new versions, we now build the system whereby we have the subframe, which can also be mounted on different self-driving platforms, or maybe behind a tractor even, or maybe mounted on a weeding bed. So currently, the manual weeding is done with these weeding beds. So people lay on these beds head first to the ground, close to the crops, to do the manual weeding. So this is now the new direction that we're heading, to have this system that contains of the subsystems that can be also mounted on other type of platforms.
And who are those early users who you're getting the robot into the fields with? You mentioned these are organic farmers. How did you find them, and what was the general reception to this robot and this concept?
Yeah, you see that these organic farmers, they are, especially now with the recent COVID crisis, you see with the borders being closed, it's very hard to find these people to do the manual weeding. And earlier, already last year, they mentioned, if you find the people, then it's hard to really stimulate them to do the work. You see that some people fall asleep on these beds, and you have to somehow make sure that they are motivated. And also the prices increased, because earlier you saw that we had a lot of people from the former Eastern Europe, like Poland, but now economies are also rising in Poland. So the people that come still, they also demand higher pay. They don't share the same house. They want their own housing. And so the people, it's a continued struggle, and it becomes harder and harder to find staff to do the work. So there's a lot of demand for it. And if you look at the carrots, on average, more than 150 hours are spent per hectare to clean the fields. And with the sowing onions, it could be even more. And with the chicory, it's also something like that. So it's quite costly. So they pay the manual weeders around more than 20 euros per hour already. So yeah, it's really, their biggest pain is really to do the weed management properly and find the people. So there's quite a market pool for that from the organic side.
And with that idea of the amount of those costs that are associated with manual weeding, what are the, I know you're at an early stage, but what are the kind of current ideas around monetization? Would people buy the robot itself, or is it something more like a monthly service of some sort?
So we really compare it now one-on-one with the manual weeding. So let's say on average they pay up to 3,000 euros per hectare to clean the fields. We plan to offer the robot as a service. So either we join forces with the employment agencies that can also utilize the robot, so maybe they can resell it or re-offer it for us. And this is also something we're going to validate this next season to see if we can offer weeding as a service, so that's more of a contract worker, or the combination with the weeding beds, so that we make sure that the hand weeders can just go much faster with the help of the robot. So this is something that we're going to find out in the next season, also to validate the pay-per-use case. And a lot of it depends, of course, on the density of the amount of weeds that are there. But we can identify each individual plant and each individual weed. So in theory, we could even charge a price per weed that we have removed. But we have to figure that out how exactly. But in short, we plan to offer it as a weeding as a service in the Netherlands. But when we go abroad, we look for partners that can do the servicing, maintenance, and offer the robots there.
Does it take any specialty knowledge to operate the robot? Is this something that somebody could pick up in a couple of days or even an afternoon, or is this something that you kind of need an engineer to manage the robot itself?
Yeah, right now it will take some skills, but we intend to make it as effortless as possible. So it will do lane keeping, and it will also be able to autonomously turn at the end of the crop row.
Very good. And in terms of, you mentioned before that you were working within the context of a university and to help that development. What are your general thoughts on working with universities to develop early startups? I'm more familiar with the United States, where sometimes there's quite a few problems in terms of balancing funding and IP and all these kind of things. But it sounds like it's been a really great experience in this case for you. So what are your kind of general views on working with universities to develop high tech startups?
Yeah, the approach can differ a lot. So there's also stories here in the Netherlands that the university, they want to be too rigid on the IP part, and therefore they almost block the growth. We took a different approach by signing up for the minor. We were like an internship provider almost, so the setup was a bit different. This was not per se a spin out from the university. We approached the university as an external party. So that worked quite well. And what I also found out is the universities are quite open also for nice and cool challenges that the students can work on. And then the approach is different. But I can imagine that if an idea sprouts and is originated at a university, then the university holds a certain right to the IP. And that can be much more complicated.
And you also recently won the Food Accelerator Network program. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so this is a program from the European Innovation and Technology. It's quite a large, how can I call it? It's almost, it's not a club, but it's a large initiative. They have different kind of angles. So they have, for instance, a climate related, a food related, energy related, almost call it an accelerator. So this was the Food Accelerator Network with different hubs all around Europe. We joined the hub in Spain. So initially the idea was to go to Bilbao for 3 months. up and down. But yeah, with COVID, it was of course all remote. So the total program was for 3 months, and it was very helpful as we got a lot of knowledge. We gained a lot of knowledge about how to structure the company, also how to measure impact, how to raise the funding, how to grow a team. And there were a lot of these classes to join and to really learn more about the entrepreneurship on one side. And on the other hand, we also got close in contact with the big corporates. They are partners in these networks because they also want to scout, of course, the new initiatives, the new innovations. So I had a talks with PepsiCo, Unilever, Bayer, and the likes of them, and that was very helpful. So for that matter, it was really opening doors to get into contact with these large corporates. And some things are still pending. I cannot disclose too much about that, but it was really like a stepping stone to Accelerate. So that was very beneficial. And that's all beside the cash prize, which was of course also a great stimulus. But the program itself was very very good, and it really accelerated us.
So it's interesting when you talk about the large corporates, in your view, what's driving their interest in technologies like this more? Because there's obviously a ability for technology like this to reduce costs, especially as labor costs arise in Europe and in the US. But then there's also the sustainability angle where, you're reducing the kind of dependence on herbicides and so on. Which is the main driver, that kind of bottom line, or are they more driven by the sustainability pressures?
I think it's a mix of both. So on one hand, they know that they have to change. So I think that's shared across the board. Everybody has this knowledge that we have to work towards a more sustainable agriculture, feeding the future, growing world population. These are themes that resonate with all. But of course, that's also on the money side. So they have to act and they have to change. Otherwise, people will just not accept it anymore. That they have to grow the foods and ethically source the foods and create much more healthier and nutritious food at an affordable price. So that is these are themes which are they kind of overlap, but it's a must almost. So it's coming from two sides, I would say. There's not per se maybe the bottom line is always money for corporates, but they also see that it has to change also for their own to have a sustainable business model.
Is there also an element where climate change itself is causing more weeds? How do you think about the growth and need for something like Odd.Bot over time, directly because of the increased temperatures, the spreading of weeds that are new to an area? And so
you see the big issues with the potatoes, for instance, especially here in this part of the world. We had this, which was causing the Irish to move out, which was because of this lost crops in the potatoes, right? So there was a lot of efforts being done to make sure that the food production would be at a certain level. So the rules around the fighting the diseases in the potatoes are really high. With the growing temperatures, you see that the potatoes that are left behind after harvest, they will survive the winter. So then if you, in the next crop circle, if you sow the beetroot, for instance, then the potatoes from the previous harvest, they become the weeds. And it's really challenging to remove all the potatoes from that were left behind because they don't get killed by the frost anymore. So that's already a good example of why there's more weeds, but then it's just, in this example, the potatoes that were left behind from a previous crop cycle.
I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I actually grew up on an organic farm in Ireland. And, even then, when we grew potatoes for the local farmers market, just enough for like maybe about 100 kilos a week kind of thing at peak. Mm-hmm. And we basically use no chemicals at all, but even blight in Ireland allows you certain types of spray because the blight is so deadly and dangerous, and you have to use a huge amount of rotation as well, because to your point, if you leave any of that in the soil, the following year it's just going to infect everything else.
Yeah,
fantastic. And so You mentioned the kind of, next year working towards this MVP and so on. Where are you in terms of scale? Like, do you have more than one robot? Are you trying to work towards a certain level of scale with the first couple of robots before you build more? And, what does kind of version 1, 2, and 3 of the robot look like?
Yeah, so really the first proof of principle was the triangle shaped version. That was more of a study object. With that, we managed to attract the funding from the proof of concept fund. And for that, to reach the proof of concept, we converted the weeding bed and we put the delta arm robot and the detection unit in there. So that is the version that we are now further going to optimize. But as a side project, we also started now with a separate robot. So that we have the weed whacker robot, and we are now building the crop sentinel. And the crop sentinel robot is a detection or inspection robot that can be put on the field before we send in the weed whacker. So the idea of this robot is that it's put on the field ahead of the robot to check and verify if our detection algorithm is on the right level, so that we can see enough weeds and identify them properly. And if not, then this crop sentinel will collect more training data, so make more pictures, which we can then use to do the retraining till the detection is at the right level, and then send in the weed whacker robot to actually perform the task. So it's more of a scout or how we call it, explorer that is going ahead of the weed whacker robot. So we have now these three types of robots, and for the next season, we're working with the optimized version from last season, where we have this delta arm robot with the detection unit. So behind the delta arm robot, we will also fit an extra detection unit so we can verify our own work. So with the first vision box, we detect the weeds and the crops, and with the robot arm, we're going to remove the weeds. Then we're going to check it if that worked out properly. Behind that, it's also a weeding bed. So there's a manual person that can still remove the weeds that we've left out. So for instance, we now don't remove weeds with overlap or are too close to the crops. And then behind the hand weeder, there's a vision box again. And we are now training an algorithm to look at the decision from the human and optimize the detection algorithm with that. So we have like a closed loop for the whole retraining cycle with both, on one hand, the crop sentinel robot, but also when we actually perform the action, we also have a retraining done by a human. So it's now one big learning machine almost.
And so one of the big challenges with any sort of machine learning model is getting good data that's well labeled. In those early days, how were you kind of, so it sounds like you're collecting that data using kind of optical, taking photos of various types. Were you then manually labeling it, or how are you trying to get a sense of like what's a weed and what's the top of a carrot?
Yeah, that involved a lot of manual labeling. Yes, yeah, and then. From there we started with pre-labeling. So then we were adjusting the labels. So we can still do a lot of pre-labeling now, as we have a detection algorithm that's performing quite well. But still, we envision that every time we want to put the robot on the field, at least now for the first coming seasons, that we have to retrain it a bit based on the new environment. So every field is a bit different with different soil or just slightly different crop family. And of course, you have the different growth stages. So there's a lot of variation on the fields. So therefore, we have this approach that will make it more robust.
One of the really interesting things as I've had more and more of these kind of podcasts and interviews is how the farm itself is becoming this kind of hub of different types of data. We already see a lot of farmers using precision agriculture products, things like satellite imagery and even drones and so on. How do you think, whereas your data set that you're building is very, very, very kind of detailed and granular, you're literally probably a few centimeters or a few inches above the ground when you're taking these photos. How do you think about the larger kind of data picture? Is there any kind of way that a farmer or a technologist working with farmers can kind of incorporate the data that you're generating with these kind of more bird's eye views like satellite imagery and so on?
Yes, for sure. We are also involved in a project together with a drone provider, which is an R&D project. We call this project the Sky Scout and the Groundbot. And the idea of this project was to see if we can optimize the performance of the Groundbot based on the bird's eye view from the drone. Yeah, we're now halfway this R&D project. And yeah, what is interesting is that with the bird's eye view, we can already detect where are the outbreaks of certain weeds. So if we arrive there with the robot, we can slow down a bit. And also, if the robot can only be utilized for a short period of time, we know where to send it in the field to be the most effective and remove the most weeds. Yeah, that's an interesting project. And yeah, I think overall we can also include different layers. So maybe also from low flying planes or maybe even satellite data where you have all the different layers. So we have our layer, of course, close to the ground, but maybe eventually you will also want to see what's happening in the ground. We can take soil samples, we can detect leaves and diseases. So yeah, the amount of data that can be utilized and also bring extra value, yeah, is huge. Yeah.
That's a really exciting concept. I've talked to a few people who are working on different types of, carbon soil sensors and so on. One of the big issues is, either the soil sensor doesn't move enough or it gets lost in a field somewhere. And like, how do you kind of justify digging things up and moving things around all the time? Whereas if you literally are connecting these things to a thing that is physically moving, and as it moves, it's adding value directly because of the weeding piece. I think it's a really interesting concept that you can start collecting all this kind of ground level data and get it into all those other kind of technology platforms that are developing that tries to combine all these data sets.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and what I'm also now assessing is a new setup whereby we can also involve the farmers themselves if they contribute to the data set, if they add imagery, or if they help us with the labeling of the data, that they can also become co-owner of this data set and also have more control on who can utilize the data. And also, we can, for instance, offer the data sets to all types of AIs to do compute on the data and use it to optimize eventually the yield and the soil health and the optimal crop health. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of approach. One of the elements that I think there's a bit of disconnect with a lot of kind of ag tech companies, is that relationship with the farmer and making sure that there is that kind of direct involvement where possible, so that there's a real kind of sense of ownership as the technology develops. And it sounds like that's definitely kind of top of mind for you. Looking at your background, Martin, like it doesn't seem like there's a huge kind of a agricultural kind of food background. How do you kind of build your knowledge of the ag tech landscape, agriculture, food, and so on?
Yeah, I work close together with these farmers. So also last season, I went on the field to collect the training data. So it's really doing a lot of interviews. But also we get a lot of help from the Wageningen University and the research institution. So Wageningen Research, they also helped us to validate the current proof of concept. So that was also very valuable. And we were utilizing their farm of the future. So we had our own field that they maintained for us. So they were sowing new carrots every 2 weeks. So we could continue and extend our test season quite long. So that is very helpful. And yeah, last but not least, we work also close together with Bionext, which is the largest organic farming association here in the Netherlands. Yeah, we got a lot of input from them. And more recently, I have launched the Trailblazer program for early adopters that want to already be involved with the first paid pilots next season. And we're really co-creating and optimizing the solution now for the next season with them. So it's really, as much as possible based on the input from the farmers.
Yeah, no, that's definitely exciting. And farmers come in all shapes and sizes, of course, but some of the most kind of technologically kind of adept and dynamic people I've ever met have been some of these farmers who are kind of they're working with robots, they're working with satellite imagery, they're working with a lot of kind of diverse technology that would put like a a modern car factory to shame nearly. And this is, a farmer who's generally regarded as, I suppose, less high tech than a lot of other industries.
Yeah, I think we can really help these farmers to also become really high tech. And this is also what you see, what's attracting the younger farmers. They also see that there's a lot of promise in the robots. But that's on the other hand, it's also, of course, a downside. We have to downplay the expectations a bit, because also with our robot, I think we cannot fully replace the hand weeder, and I think we should not aim for it, despite the great engineering task. But yeah, if we can really get to 80% of the performance of a hand weeder for, let's say, half of the cost, yeah, I think then we have a great business case, and then we can go to market quite soon as well.
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about things like, well, your food delivery startup and autonomous driving and so on. 80% in an open course with the public running around is not acceptable. But I think in these kind of closed course areas, 80% is an amazing number. Warehouses effectiveness with autonomous vehicles as well. That's where I see a lot of the kind of growth in this kind of technology coming in these kind of more closed courses where there's kind of more control, who has access, and all that kind of thing. And you can, to your point, if you can make it 3/4 of the way as effective for half the price, that's always a win.
Yeah. That's also what I think. Yeah.
Just on yourself personally. So, you've founded a few startups. What have you most changed your mind about, as a founder since, your first kind of founding story to Odd.Bot and then everything in between?
Yeah, what really helped was the way to get the funding. So with the previous startups, also with the food delivery, it's a complete different business, of course, and it's really a marketing driven endeavor. So for that it was very hard to attract funding, and I see that this is so high on the agenda from both the farmers, but also from the European Union's perspective, and also from the UN perspective, as we tackle 7 of the sustainable development goals. Yeah, therefore, I think that's really driving and helping. And also, I guess one of the reasons that we managed to win the Food Accelerator network, because we tick so much boxes. So yeah, that was for me the main thing, that we really have the wind in the sails, so to speak. Whereby earlier with the startups, I was struggling much more to keep the boat afloat and to get the things moving. And here, people reach out to us, hey, can we help? And people also get rewarded just with the feeling that they can help and contribute to a more sustainable future. And also some people in the team, they also see that they have the stories about their relatives that they got sick, and they read the reports that eating this sprayed food is potentially a cause of their disease, with Parkinson or other types of related illnesses. So you just see that everybody sees that things needs to change, and then it's great to contribute to that. And it's much more rewarding also to with the delivery service. It was also a great endeavor, but this is so much bigger already.
Yeah, it's a couple of really great points there. I definitely agree with what you mentioned about picking the right startup for the right moment. I had a previous startup which was in the fitness space, and a lot of it was a great idea. It was just 6 years too late. There wasn't any investment for that anymore. Whereas if we tried to launch that in 2009, it might have been something really big. But you already had Mind, Body, and so on. Years earlier. And so now, when I talk to other founders or potential founders, I'm like, if you want a VC backable company or business or startup, you have to try to nearly design it with that in mind. If you want a lifestyle business, that's great as well, but it's just a different type of business. And so, what I think is really great about Oddboss and your kind of general approach is that you kind of combine this kind of high tech kind of approach, perfect kind of moment in terms of, you're literally getting requested to work on this by the, regulation. And then you also have the kind of private capital kind of starting to flow back into ag tech, clean tech, and so on. And and your last point about, mission I think there's a lot of startups that claim to have these very high and lofty missions, and I think most people can kind of see through it, right? Like, again, the kind of fitness startup that I was involved in, had a good mission, but it wasn't like a kind of change the world type mission. Whereas if you're actively trying to decarbonize and increase the sustainability of agriculture, like that's of all the food that we all eat. I mean, that's this amazing thing, and definitely the kind of thing that helps with the hiring and recruiting process.
Yeah, that's also what we see. Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, Martin, I really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything I should have asked you about but did not?
No, I think we covered it all, James. Yeah, it was good to have the chat, and I will definitely continue to follow the podcasts. And yeah, I've appreciated the invite and being on your podcast show.
Thank you very much.